Hey LAN Party Gamers! Today we're going to be doing something and getting ready to play Flight Simulator 2020 on the new 3000 series graphics cards from NVIDIA. As you know, if you kept up with my little green system here, we're now in the Sliger Cerberus case. We're down to one 1080 Ti to keep our thermals in check, so no more SLI, and we're using a 1650 OC in place of that second 1080 Ti to handle our stream, second monitor, and physics for the system. Getting a lot of that workload off of the first 1080 Ti and improving its thermals drastically by not having its input fan blocked by a second 1080 Ti. So that everything's been working great, and we actually have a stable overclock of 5 gigahertz. That's I think we'll see the voltages in a bit, but we're doing great. We did a flight in a Bonanza in the flight sim here from San Diego all the way to Denver on 5 gigahertz without issue. Now, after a while, especially in really populated series, here we are loaded in an icon over Manhattan, or rather over New York, looking to go towards Manhattan. We're going to be seeing our 5 gigahertz clock slowly go down, and that's because of thermals. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some introductory temperatures and core settings and things like that, and then I'm going to try something I've never done, which is delid our 7700K and reapply its thermal paste, but instead we're using liquid metal, and see how much that improves, if at all, our 7700K's performance, because the whole goal of this is we want to make sure that our CPU is not going to be the bottleneck when we throw in a 3000 series card. As it stands right now, and we're just paused over New York here, my GPU is running at 100% as it renders all these buildings in, renders our airplane here, and our CPU, even while OBS is running, although it is being encoded by the 1650, is sitting at 73% and running at 4.87, 4.9 gigahertz. It's not even hitting 5 gigahertz, and some of that is because of temps. But right now our highest core is about 80 to 84 degrees Celsius, so just in the warning zone. Remember, it can hit 100 degrees before it starts to throttle. So what we want to do is have those sort of not super high clock temps be well under that warning zone of 80 degrees Celsius. And that way, when we do get the 3000 series cards, the fact that our CPU is only running at 60% when the 1080 Ti is maxed out, we're hoping that our CPU has all that extra headroom, that 30 to 40% headroom on percentage of use when the 3000 series cards, and it's pushing those frames. So let's get some temperatures and stuff. We're going to fly around New York here and see what the temps are and things of that nature. Okay, so here is the Empire State Building, and for reference here we're getting 39 FPS with everything rendered in here. Our CPU usage is getting up to 92 as we started moving, so that's some of that headroom we want to make sure and keep. We do not want this thing throttling, because 92 is getting pretty close to 100% utilization there. Our GPU is maxed out, which means we're using every bit of power from this 1080 Ti, so that's great. It means that right now, at least, our 7700K is not the bottleneck for this game. It was a lot closer to a bottleneck when we were running our stock speeds, however, so the overclock is definitely necessary, and I'm glad that it's stable here at 5 gigahertz, but I don't see it even ramping up to 5 gigahertz. We're looking at a 92 now on the core temps as we get closer to Manhattan here. We're looking at the Freedom Tower, aka the One World Trade Center. 87 degrees, 91, 80% CPU. There's 95 CPU utilization. So we definitely want to make sure we can maintain this 5 gigahertz clock speed. I'm flying in the Icon here, which is a watercraft, a flying boat, if you will. But here we go. So just do a little tour. And then there's where the trade centers used to be, down there in those fountains. And you can see those core temps really go up when I go between these buildings. For those interested in our settings here, we are playing on Ultra, and we're playing it, let's see, it's the 3K, so the native resolution of this monitor, with our render scaling at 100%. So we're not upsampling or anything like that. This is the Asus, I believe it's a P34Q 100 Hz G-Sync monitor. And I mean, the game's running beautifully. I'm getting 40 FPS solid. Definitely nothing to complain about here, except that my core temps are creeping up. All 4 cores are now in, dancing with that warning temperature of over 81 degrees Celsius. Okay, so we're in the studio and we're ready to tear down the 7700K little green build. And with that, we've got the Delidding tool off of Amazon. We've got a Permatex Ultra Black gasket maker. We're going to use this sparingly because less is more when we're talking about distance between the PCB and the IHS. And then we've got our Cool Labs Liquid Ultra. This is liquid metal, and this is what's going to be between the CPU itself and the heat spreader. So let's go ahead and take it apart and see if we don't brick my 7700K. I'm a little worried that the CPU, or I'm sorry, the new GPUs, because of their length, are going to go past this mark here. So, I guess we'll find out in a week and a half, or 2 weeks, or whatever. Okay, let's see how we did. Yeah, it's not bad for as far as thermal application. Did I have this plugged into the pump? I did! Good job, Brian. You know how to build a computer. Let's go ahead and take this processor out. That's the stuff. Alright, so we've got this Amazon tool here. So we'll see how this is supposed to work. Comes with this little Allen wrench. And here, I'll put it on this white so we can see it. And the idea is instead of getting like a knife or something underneath the the IHS, this is going to pry it off little by little so you don't accidentally slice your hand open or something like that. So let's take this part out. Now the question is, unfortunately it didn't really come with any instructions, so good luck everybody. Okay, fits in there. Let's see if this fits in there now. Okay, yeah, so that pushes up against the top of the IHS, but it doesn't push up on the PCB. So we'll just do that, and we should be able to, as I crank it, see it shift over, assuming this works out right. There it is. Little pop. I don't know if anybody could hear that. There we go. So I got it all the way till it stopped that time, and I can see the glue underneath now, which I couldn't before. And there it comes. And there it is. Can you see that? Alright, so now what we have to do is clean up all the glue on the outside, as well as on the chip itself, the die itself, and on the IHS, and before we can apply our liquid metal compound. So, here we go. And then we can do like, I can use parts of this. Oh, that cleans up super duper nice. Okay, so here we go. It doesn't have the itty bitty needle on the end, so wish me luck everybody. This little blob. And this little blob might even be enough for both. What do you think?
I think we probably spread that out.
Yeah, I mean that alone is enough for probably the whole top.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll use that for both. A little bit goes a long way apparently. Because what your best bet is having the top of this touch the bottom of this if you didn't need thermal interface material. That's even better. So there it is. Alright, with the CPU and the IHS now painted with the liquid metal, we'll take our gasket creator here and try to put a little bit of this gasket stuff on the wings of the IHS. But I don't want to do too much because we're just basically making it to hold if we ever have to take the CPU out of the socket. And any more than we need might create a gap between the heat spreader and the CPU, which would mean that there's no thermal conductivity, and all of this would have been for naught. So let's see how well that spreads out. And we used this little corner of this little piece of cardboard to spread it out nice and even and thin on the wings of the IHS. Fingers crossed. And we're going to go ahead and use the actual socket here to put the pressure down on the heat spreader in order to make sure that that glue sets tight. There we go. All right, moment of truth. Does it turn on? Okay, the RAM's lit up. You can't see it, but does it post? I hear the hard drive's wearing. Come on. Oh, oh! Didn't ruin it.
It doesn't recognize the CPU though.
i7 7700, and it says the speed's at 4200 megahertz, but it says new CPU installed, and it's at F1 to run setup. So we just need a keyboard in here and take a look at those temperatures. We went ahead and cranked the CPU cooler really hard down on it to get that pressure, and let's do some testing. I'm really excited. So that loads our 5 gigahertz profile. So here's our turbo mode frequency is 5 gigahertz, and our, let's see, sync all core is good. Just making sure. Our DRAM frequency, that is wrong. I need to enable XMP, but this should be 2666. It's pretty RAM, it ain't fast RAM. Let's see. CPU power management, speed step. Okay, turbo's enabled. That has to be there. And then here we go. So the core cache current limit max is the highest value that this motherboard will allow, and basically that's just how many watts or amps or whatever will be allowed to be used by the motherboard, and you just max it out. It's never going to hit that, but if you have it lower than that, sometimes your computer will just turn off. So we do that. Here we go. The voltage override that I've got set in here is 1.39 volts. That seems a little high, but the max is 1.7. So we'll see how that does. And if we can go lower, we can go lower, but temperature shouldn't be an issue anymore. We'll find out. And let's see what happens when we get into Windows. All right, so we just booted into Windows, got the memory clocked correct and everything, and we're at 4.94, ranging around there as far as clock speeds while it's booting up. Remember, it's only going to hit that 5 gigahertz when it needs to. Otherwise, it's going to pick a speed that the demand is qualified for, and basically, we've got all of our cores sitting comfortably in the 30s. Our hottest core right now, let's take a look here, is at 41 degrees. So at idle, we're looking pretty good. Obviously, we haven't turned on any games, and we'll take a look at what the idle was from our before shots, but so far I'm pretty happy. We'll have to see how if it burns in a little bit, maybe the thermal compound still needs to get on all the surfaces right, but we've got it crimped down pretty far, so I'm excited to see what happens when we take this back upstairs, get it in the same conditions we had with the graphics card reinstalled, and see how Flight Sim works at 5 gigahertz. So I'm real excited. Let's go take a look. All right, so we're loaded into the icon. We're looking at New York again, and I see temperatures down in the 50s. My frame rate is at 33 FPS. So remember, what we're looking for is not an increase in frame rate, which I know you guys aren't going to be able to see, but a decrease of overall core temps. And by the end of this flight, on our preliminary scores, we're getting in the oranges, which is over 81 degrees on core temp. Our GPU is maxed out, and we have only 42% used on our CPU. So let's see how we do as we get in towards the Statue of Liberty. So we're flying around, and I'm going to try not to overspeed this thing. We go 60% CPU utilization, 4.88 gigahertz, but it's not going to go any faster than that because our GPU is maxed out. So that's the entire point of this exercise, is with a 5 gigahertz overclock, I have headroom. I've got like 54%. That gives me 46% of my CPU not being used. Because my GPU is 100% out, which means that 3000 series card might be a good investment. And we're sitting at 32 FPS, looking right downtown in and among these buildings. Still 32 FPS and no warning signs. I'm sitting at 60, 58, 57 degrees on core temp. By this point, I think we had 1 or 2 cores well over 80 degrees on the preliminary, but you can go back to the beginning of the video and take a look and compare the two. Try not to overspeed here. Well, there's 1 core. It kind of gets up there above the 81 degree mark. Back down. Oh, all of them hit it there for a second. Something must have loaded into the background. Because remember, we're streaming everything off the internet for this game. So as we get further and further in one direction, it's got to load stuff in the distance, and the CPU is handling all of that as well. But 31 FPS, I don't think we've dropped below 30 during this demo. Last time I believe we were hitting 27 or whatever. There's 28. So again, the frame rate is not what we're looking at. We're looking at the temperatures, which are all looking like, there we go, there's a few above what we were. So with that, I mean, and as soon as we get out of the game, though, they drop right back down to under 60, 59, 58. I'm going to call that a win for this one. So that's pretty good. Well, we saw some dramatic changes between our old temperatures before we delidded and put the liquid metal on there to now. And although our frames don't change because our GPU is the same, our 1080 Ti is still going to be our mainstay until the 3000 series cards come out. Our headroom left over on the CPU is definitely going to be keeping the CPU from being the bottleneck during flight simulator games and other games at this resolution. So I'm really happy to see that we got a savings of, well, if we're looking at it now, the game you just watched me play, we got a max temperature of 86 degrees Celsius before we crashed into that building. And on our last playthrough at the beginning of the video, all 4 cores hit 100 degrees and we thermal throttled. So that's a difference of 14 degrees, and it could have even been higher, but the CPU obviously isn't going to allow itself to get over 100 degrees Celsius. So 14 degrees, that's a change and a half right there. So we're just sticking at 5 gigahertz because I like to have some room in my thermal ability of my CPU where I'm not burning it out every time I play. But it's a pretty decent overclock considering the stock speed is 4.2 gigahertz without turbo. And I'm really happy with how this all worked out. So hopefully that helps you out. If you need any more detailed videos on doing anything like this, check out Gamer's Nexus video. He has a lot of really good tips that we used on how to apply the thermal compound and things like that. And stay tuned because very shortly, very soon, the 3000 series cards are coming out, and and we're going to see how Flight Sim works on a number of graphics cards, including the 3090, the 3080, twin 1080 Ti's in our Flight Sim rig, one of them being the card that's in this system now, as well as 1060s, 1050 Ti's on a number of different display resolutions. So stay tuned for that video coming up very shortly, and make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell down below. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.